Hi, I'm Ray from the Radio Workshop with another tale of pirating from the 60s and 70s, decades ago now. Hard to think that we're in 2018 now, and this was so long ago. Just shows my age. I mean, I'm coming up to 50 and a few hundred months. I used to enjoy tuning around medium wave. Okay, especially on a Sunday, because there were pirate stations everywhere. So there I was on a Sunday with my radio, tuning about, seeing what I could hear. I knew the medium wave band pretty well. I knew the BBC stations. I knew exactly what was where on the band, because evenings, weekends, I was always tuning around medium wave. Quite interesting. Sometimes hear some American stations at night. So a bit of medium wave DXing, good fun. And it was one Sunday, I was just tuning around, sort of midday-ish, whatever, when all the pirates were usually on. And I came across on the dial, I forget the frequency now, like a church service. People singing hymns in a church, the vicar doing a sermon. Normally you wouldn't think anything of it, but I thought, hang on, that shouldn't be there. That shouldn't be there on the dial. Is this some BBC relay thing or outside broadcaster? I don't know what is it? It shouldn't be there on the dial. I knew that much. I carried on listening till the service ended. The vicar was saying, thank you everyone for coming, see you next Sunday, or whatever he was saying. And I'm waiting for the announcement. You're listening to BBC, whatever. And after a couple of minutes, I could hear all people talking in the church as they were leaving, presumably. Then the transmitter went off. Just went off the air, no announcement, nothing. And what's going on here? Anyway, the following Sunday, I listened again, and I listened early on that frequency. It came on, I think it was about 11 o'clock, I can't remember the time, about 11 o'clock. It came on, and there's the vicar welcoming people into the church. So I thought, this is local to me. This is not some BBC broadcast from miles away. This is local to me. So jumped in my car, my trusty transistor radio, and I tracked it down. Now I knew it was coming from a church, or assumed it was coming from a church, as it was a pre-recorded thing, which it didn't seem to be. Anyway, I found the church, not too far away from where I lived. So I parked my car, looking around for aerials around this church, couldn't see anything. And I was still thinking in the back of my mind BBC, because I didn't kind of associate pirate radio transmissions with a church service on a Sunday. Pirate radio was pop music and stuff like that, not a church service, hymns and a sermon. So I'm wandering around outside the church. I could hear people singing inside, and that's what I could hear on the radio. So it was live, because I listened on my transistor radio. Anyway, put the radio in my jacket pocket, a little one. Went and sat at the back of the church, and I stayed there throughout the whole service, every now and then turning my radio. Yeah, it's still going. This was being transmitted live, and I was intrigued, to say the least. What's going on here? Is this legal? When I first got there, I expected to see like a BBC outside broadcast van or something. Nothing. No aerial outside, nothing. But it was a good signal where I live. I was, a mile or so away, I suppose, as the crow flies. A good signal. Anyway, I sat there throughout the service. I joined in with the hymns and stuff like that, and I listened to it all until we got to the end. People started leaving, and the vicar stands outside the door. Oh, thank you so much for coming. Glad you enjoyed the service. Thank you so much. So I'm kind of queuing up with the people, ready to talk to him. Oh, nice to see you, he said as I approached him. I was the last one. And a very bubbly sort of chap. Lovely to see you. Such a young face as well, shaking hands. And he said, oh, so glad you came here. How did you hear about us? Haven't seen you here before. I said, I heard you on the radio. he sort of, oh, on the radio? Oh, right. And so, he looked, I won't say guilty, but anyway. So I said, yeah, on medium wave. I tuned in last Sunday, and I thought I'd come and have a listen. He said, well, how did you know it was this church? So I said, transistor radio, I tracked you down. And he's looking around again like this. And he said, you're not the GPO, are you? I said, no, I'm not the GPO, no. I said, well, this is a pirate station then. And he said, well, it's just for my parishioners, you know. He said, not all the congregation, they can't always get here on a Sunday. You know, sometimes, like, especially bad weather, they can't get out. Some of them are ill, so they listen at home. So he said, I've set up a transmitter. So I said, well, you know, I had quite a chat with him actually about this. I said, well, where's the aerial? Oh, it's up inside the steeple. He built the transmitter. You know, we had a chat for only about half an hour because he had other things to do. But yeah, he built the transmitter. He said that he used to be in broadcasting many years ago, decades ago. He was in broadcasting, ended up as a vicar, decided to build a little 10 watts, apparently 10 watt medium wave transmitter to, you know, just for his sort of local, his flock as he called them. So I said, well, this is illegal. I said, you thought I was a GPO. I said, have you ever had a visit? How long have you been doing this? Anyway, he'd been doing it for a few months. I'm surprised I hadn't heard it before, actually. I probably had, but perhaps just didn't think anything of it. You know, you wouldn't, would you? You're tuning around medium wave, listening for pirates. You hear a church service. You know, you're not going to stop on that. I only did. I may have heard it in the past. I don't know, but I only did because I thought that someone had said to me there's going to be a pirate transmission somewhere around that frequency, and that's when I tuned in. I thought, what's this doing here? That shouldn't be there. But you know, normally it's not the sort of thing you'd stop on that station and think, hello, pirate. You know, not with people singing hymns. Anyway, he said, look, promise me you won't tell any of your friends of that, because he said, are you a pirate? I said, oh, no, you know, certainly not. Perish the thought. I said, I'm just a sort of shortwave listener, you know, I like tuning around. And he said, well, don't tell anyone, because you know, it's such a good sort of community thing that he got going. And he did actually say to me, although he'd never had a visit, he said, the GPO must be aware of what I'm doing. You know, you can't transmit every Sunday. And I said, well, or perhaps they don't. Perhaps they're not aware, you know, that they just think, oh, it's some BBC thing. Because obviously they tuned around listening for pirates. Perhaps, you know, like other people, you just don't take any notice of it. A church service on the radio, Sunday morning. Last thing you'd expect coming from a pirate radio station. Just before I left, he showed me the transmitter, his little office he had on the side of the church. The transmitter was on the windowsill. It was only a small thing in a box that he'd built. He'd hooked it up to the church audio kind of system, you know, the microphone and speakers. He'd hooked it up to that somehow. I mean, as he said, he was in broadcasting, so he sort of knew what he was doing. Yeah, just a little transmitter. I forget what valves it used, but it was behind. He had some books, quite a wide window, so he had some books in front of it, and he just sort of slid these books along, and there's the transmitter. So great fun. Anyway, that was that. You know, I thought I'd have a listen in every Sunday, just out of interest. I didn't tell anyone, my mates, because, you know, they'd all start tuning in. I thought they're going to go around the church. Oh, let's have a look at your gear, and he had said, you know, he didn't want it spoilt because it had been working well for months, so I kept it to myself. And what happened was, I used to tune around in the evenings quite a bit on medium wave, and on the Vicar's frequency, right, one evening, I heard some music. You see, and I thought, I don't know, what's this? This shouldn't be here. This is someone's pirating. And I remember specifically it was Jim Reeves, right? Welcome to my world, or whatever was playing, something like that. So it wasn't your usual pirate like pop station, because they didn't play stuff like that. Jim Reeves, you know, good though it was, they didn't play it. So I listened, and the DJ, right, I called him a DJ, it was the vicar. I recognised his voice. He said, there we are, Jim Reeves. So that was for whoever, you know, that was for Fred. Hope you get well soon, Fred, and we can see you on Sundays again. You know, hope you're soon out of your sick bed or whatever. And I thought, this is the vicar. This was a weekday evening. So I carried on listening. If I forget that time it went off, but anyway, it went off the air eventually. You know, see you all Sunday and everything like that. And the transmitter went off. And I listened I didn't go back to the church because I didn't want him to think I was pestering him. But I listened over a period of time, and every Wednesday between 7 and 9, right, on the Vicar's frequency. He came on and he did his 2-hour transmission. Messages to his local, his flock, and playing sort of that type music. Not Hendrix and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, but this radio sort of light entertainment, like the BBC Light programme used to be, which is now Radio 2. Just sort of light entertainment stuff, and it was brilliant. He had a good voice, really came across well on the radio, and he'd chat between each record. As I say, 2 hours every Wednesday evening. It was absolutely amazing. I did pop back to the church one Sunday after the service and see him, because I've been listening for some weeks, and I wanted to chat about the Wednesday night transmission. And he said, "Oh, you listening to that? Are you?" He said, "How did you find that?" And I said, "Well, I'm always tuning around medium wave." And I said, "This is a criminal offence." He was laughing, and I said, "You don't normally associate a vicar with a criminal offence." Anyway, he said that his parishioners, they all love it. They tune in every Wednesday, and he said, "I've got over 200 listeners." I said, 200? How do you know that? He said, "Well, a good congregation on Sunday." He said, "They all listen." And he said that he's done a rough count, and it is well over 200. So I thought, if there's over 200, we never got that amount. I don't know what we had really with our pirate stations. Not me, other people, my friends' pirate stations, not mine. I don't suppose we had 200 listeners, regular listeners like that. Mind you, we weren't on the air regularly. It was very hit and miss. This chap he had his captive audience, I suppose. They were his flock, and they all tuned in. One thing I didn't say was he started talking about FM, transmitting on VHF, on band 2. I said, "I wouldn't do that, they will track you down." He said, "Well, look, if they haven't tracked me down on medium wave, because people were going over, I forget, this was the 70s, people were going over to FM, still lots of medium wave pirate broadcasts around. Most people had a long medium wave transistor radio, and not everyone had VHF on the radio. But anyway, he was thinking of going over to VHF. And he said, as well as medium wave. I said, "Right, don't push your luck, you might be getting some help from up there, but some protection from the GPO from up there." But I said, there are limits. Anyway, yes, I thought, I went away and I'm thinking about this. I thought, how about when he finishes transmitting at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday, you've got at least 200 people about to turn their radios off. I thought, how about if not me, this friend of mine, although I didn't tell anyone, how about if we go on the air at 9 o'clock? Not, as I say, not to blast out Hendrix, but a similar type of, in a similar vein, a bit of Jim Reeves and a bit of perhaps Cliff Richard, that sort of thing. So one Wednesday he went off the air, and this friend of mine was ready, transmitter on, right, on the same frequency and everything, obviously, and said, "Right, thank you for that. That was a lovely 2 hours listening or whatever." And he said, "Now stay with us, because we have another hour of lovely music, blah blah blah, for the flock or whatever." And this we didn't know. I didn't want to go back to the church. We didn't know whether people were still listening. We assumed that they hadn't all rushed to turn the transistor radio off the minute the vicar had finished his broadcast. They're going to have to sort of reach over to it or whatever. But we were straight there. I eventually went back after a few weeks. I went back to the church, and the vicar said, "There's some other station. My people have told me there's some other station that comes on a Wednesday at 9 o'clock when I go off." And I said, "Yes, I've heard it." He knew. I said, "I've heard that." I said, that's interesting. I said, "What are your thoughts on that?" I can't remember verbatim our conversations, obviously, but this is roughly how it went. And he said, "Well, I think it's a good thing." He said, I've listened. He said, "What I do now is I turn the transmitter off and I put my radio on in my office." He said, "I have a listen." And he said, "You had lovely music. and he was saying, nice voice, nice smooth, what was it? It's, the dark brown voice or something, he said. So, yeah, that's basically the story. This friend of mine, he didn't transmit every Wednesday after the Vicar forever. After a few weeks went by, got a bit bored with it. But the Vicar, he did every Sunday. I don't know how long for. It's certainly for a year, at least a year. He was transmitting every Sunday and every Wednesday evening. As I say, it was over a year, at least a year. I tuned in one. I wasn't tuning every Sunday and every Wednesday because I had other things to do. And whenever on a Wednesday, if I was around, I'd have a listen to the Vicar. I remember it was one particular Wednesday. I thought, I wonder whether the Vicar's fired up, and I listened. It wasn't there. So I thought, that's odd. Whenever I tuned in on Wednesday, he was there. The following Sunday, I tuned in, nothing. So I drove around the church. I thought, this is odd. It's missed a Wednesday and a Sunday. So, no, in fact, that happened for 2 weeks. That's right, 2 Wednesdays and 2 Sundays. I eventually drove around the church on the Sunday, and there's another Vicar there at the door saying goodbye to people. I think, where's this Vicar? I'd got to know him quite well, actually. And I said to the chap, where's the other one gone? He said, he's been moved. So I said, that's a shame. I didn't realise that, being moved. And he didn't go into why. He said, they've just moved him to another church. And I said, do you know where? And he said, no, I don't. I'm sorry, That was that. I said, I got to know him quite well. I'd like to contact him. And he said, I'm sorry, I don't know where. So I don't know. I don't know whether he'd got caught or, busted by the GPO or the told off by the bishop or whatever. Oh dear. So that was that. The funny thing is, CB radio, even these days now, when conditions are right on certain CB channels, 27 megs obviously, you can hear, if the skip is right, as they say, you can hear church services coming from Ireland. This has been going on for a number of years. I don't know how long. They actually, the vicars, presumably the priests or whatever, have got a CB rig, and you can listen to church services. I read somewhere on the internet, this is for people that can't get to the church, the congregation at home, sort of thing. They can listen on the CB to the service. The funny thing is, this vicar, it was early 70s. He was doing this on medium wave before CB even got to this country. So I don't know, was he the first vicar ever to run a pirate radio station from his church and get away with it? I don't know what happened in the end. It's such a shame, because would have liked to have kept in touch with him. But there we are. I just thought you might like to hear that little story. There'll be more coming soon.